And we're live. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour with our favorite author, the man that, if you've read his book, you would be like me. You would be the smartest guy in marketing. I get to hang out with Will Leach every week. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour, where we get to learn about all the things from Will's book, Marketing to Mindstate. So looky there behind me.
I like that.
Yeah, I got to start wearing gloves during the show. Will, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great. Listen, I always do great when you introduce me like that, because I always like, no matter how I feel, I'm like, man, if I'm making this guy the smartest guy in marketing, that says something great about me. That's a great way to start any meeting. So I'll take it. I feel great with you. How you doing, man? You sound better.
I'm better. You know, that's I'm still got a little cough in the mornings, but you know, you just show up, do the show. It's winning anytime we can hang out with Will. And today we've got a great topic. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. 5 psychological triggers that increase conversion rates. Mm-hmm. And anytime there's psycho in the title, my flags go up. What are we talking about here, Will?
Steve, today we're going to talk about these 5 words that you can use to get anybody to do anything, anytime, anywhere. And with these 5 words, you can make a multi-million-dollar business like I have by controlling the minds of those that you want to serve. And I'm going to tell you about these triggers.
Wait a minute. We're not talking about psycho marketing here. It's about the 5 psychological triggers that it can increase conversion rates. Calm down here, Buster.
Oh man, yeah, So I got into myself for a minute. So listen, we're going to talk about triggers today, and I love talking about triggers because I like to dispel myths around triggers. I even have a company called Trigger Point. Trigger Point, and oftentimes I will have my clients, and I love my clients, every one of them. They will say things like, I want to trigger people to buy my product. I want to figure out the trigger point, which is always a great thing when your company name turns into a verb or an adjective or whatever that would be. Anyways, there is a lot of misconception around triggers and what is the word, what is the color that you can do to get somebody to take action. And today, we're going to talk about what a trigger really is, how it's very useful for you, but it is not the end all be all. And I'm going to tell you 5 of my favorite ones, just because I think they're fascinating and I've had some pretty good success with them. And we're just going to have a conversation around better marketing.
All right. So first of all, let's start with, what's your book about? Okay. It talks about triggers in there, but there's some other things. And so I always like to say,
thank you.
What I enjoy about Will's book is that we as marketers, we wanted to write good content. But the problem is, if we're writing one size fits all content for every audience, we're missing the mark. And the light bulb went off in my head when I realized that, you think about it, you wake up one day, you're either in a good mood or you're in a bad mood. And then a few minutes later, your kids run through and then you're in a good mood now. And then you get in your car and it won't start, you go into a bad mood. And so we're in different moods, not just good and bad, but we're in different moods. And we usually tee up to a certain state of mind when we're evaluating a decision. And that's where marketing to mind states really made or really resonated with me, is like, wow, if I knew the kind of mind state that folks are generally in when they're considering our solution, then I would tighten up my marketing message to really resonate, connect with them, and make them feel understood. I really appreciate your book. Tell us a little bit more about what triggered you writing that book.
It really, honestly, and I write about this story in my book. I was trying to help identify the best practices in marketing for PepsiCo. So I was tasked with understanding the psychological principles that were most important in creating the best advertising that got people to listen, care, and act. And what I did was I initially focused on the word triggers, because we all hear this word triggers. And how can I trigger people to buy my product? How can I trigger them to want my product versus another? And so basically what I did is I started looking at triggers, which we'll talk about in a second. It's around behavioral economics. But in that, when I looked at triggers, it made an assumption. And what it assumed was that all because I use a word, it meant that, or word or some sort of a phrase, that I could get somebody to buy my product. It did not take into account, first, somebody has to believe the product is going to help them in some way. It didn't say that it created an emotional desire for that product. It didn't lower resistance. And so it was through this first idea, which was help identify how to make the most successful, impactful marketing out there. I was paid a lot of money to go figure this out. And when I figured it out, I figured out that there's actually not just one thing you have to do. There are 4 things you have to do. And that's what I uncover in my book.
All right. So triggers help people make decisions faster and easier. Now, I want to really talk before we get right there. It seems like, well, is this manipulation? Are you tricking me? And I would argue is like, you know what I hate? When it's time to make a decision that I'm asked a couple of additional questions to really justify that decision. I hate it. Mm-hmm. Okay. So you go in and you order, I would like a green chicken curry today. Okay, great. And what would you like to drink? I'd like water. Would you like a lemon with that? It's like, come on, man, you're beating the dead horse is what I feel like. And how nice when I saw this is like triggers would help me just state it and get back to the conversation instead of continually being interrogated about my order.
It's a psychological principle. And we talk about that on this show all the time, that you make so many decisions in the thousands. In fact, research tells you make about 35,000 decisions on any given day. If you can make the decision to buy your product or to, use your service, if you can do that in a very fast and easy way, the human mind tends to go that direction. Why? It's because it's faster and easier and your brain doesn't have to work. I love that. Thank you. So let's first talk about what triggers are, because I think there's like I said, there's this misconception that if I just use this upsell or if I put in this trigger of some kind that I can manipulate people to buy. There is nothing in behavioral psychology or any behavioral science that I've seen that tells you that by using a certain number of words in this order, you can make somebody do something that they don't want to do. It doesn't happen. I mean, so I think it comes from the Avengers movies, right? Remember Bucky or the Winter Soldier? If you guys saw I love superheroes, right? And all of a sudden there's these phrases that Dr. Zemo says, and that turns a normal, okay Bucky into a killer. And I think because of back in the 60s and 70s, we're talking about subconscious and manipulation and subliminal marketing, that we got this idea that the human mind is so manipulative, or it can be manipulated to increase people's desire to do things they wouldn't do. There is nothing that tells me that that's possible. All a trigger does is make a decision you already want to make faster and easier. And again, that's a slightly easier path of least resistance.
So you have on here, triggers are universally commonly used in systematic so they can be leveraged in marketing. What are some great examples that you see other brands doing?
Yeah, we talk about this. One of the first things that I always talk about when I'm trying to explain what a trigger is social proof. And social proof is just something called a cognitive heuristic. We call them triggers. A cognitive heuristic or a trigger that tells people that they assign more value to a decision that lots of other people make. So rather than doing cost benefit analysis on should I take this decision and should I go forward with the decision or not, and doing all the cost benefit analysis, a trigger would say hundreds of other people have chosen us, so can you. So what I mean by triggers, there's 3 words that are really important there. First is they're universal, meaning we all use triggers. Everybody out there uses triggers. Secondly, they're commonly used, meaning they're used a lot. So not only does everybody use them, but you tend to use these things often. It's not just you use these triggers once or twice a day. You're using these triggers multiple times a day, every single day. And we use these things so much that they become systematic, meaning that they can be predicted and that you could say, in this context, in this moment, this person tends to make the fastest decision around a trigger. Maybe it's social proof, like I just said. So when you know that they're universal, meaning every one of your customers use them. Secondly, they tend to use them again and again, and they tend to use the same ones again and again and again. Your job has to be just to identify which of these triggers is most important to you in your category, in your business, right? So everything I'm going to show you today, I'm going to show you 5 that I like. I am not saying these are the 5 that you should go use. I am saying these are a number 5 that you can use, and you just have to figure out of, my book has 21. There's other books that have more or less. You have to figure out which of these most impact your customers when they're making a decision for your company.
All right. Number 1 is licensing effect. I couldn't answer this question. I'm interested in this.
That's the issue, right? The problem is that these things, these heuristics, these triggers are given these complex names like licensing effect. And so if you're not really into this stuff, then you look at that and you say, license, I need a license for that. I'm done, right? So what I want to do is I want to simplify the academic into the reality, the easy to understand stuff. So there is a trigger called licensing effect. And really what that is that it's a tendency to prefer items that are in perfect balance. So what licensing effect does is imagine your brain is constantly trying to fill up 2 different buckets. Maybe it's good, bad, maybe it's expensive, not expensive, but it's constantly trying to fill up these buckets. And what it looks for is balance, because if you're being too good, then you deserve a little bad. Or if you've been too bad, you feel this desire to be good. So the human mind just naturally desires to have balance. So what I like to say is, rather than calling it licensing effect, you just say, listen, people prefer things to be in a perfect balance. And if you found out that your customers in your category, whatever it is you sell, that this is an important trigger, this idea about this perfect balance, you can use language and you can actually create this perfect balance. And again, if they see that language, if they know that you're providing them a perfect balance, they're more likely to be drawn towards you, because they're like, listen, I don't have to make this decision, this calculation. They know the importance of a perfect balance. Let me go buy that product.
So what's an example? I'm trying to think of one myself.
I actually talk about it a lot. So I studied snacks for many, many, many years. And what we heard with snacks again and again and again, salty snacks, but actually any kind of snack, fruit snacks, chocolate snacks, whatever, is that there's this tension. And the tension is, I want something to taste great, but I also want it to be somewhat healthy. There's this tension that's constant. So we find that it's great for tension. Another one, remember back in the 80s, right? We had Miller Lite, taste great, less filling, taste great, right? So the desire is, here's what you can do as a marketer. You can lean on one of those. Absolutely can do that. Say, we are taste great. Our snack tastes better than everybody. And that's Hostess, right? Hostess is unapologetic in saying that our products are not meant for you to lose weight. They're unapologetic. Then you have something like Smart Pop, which you kind of know that it's not going to taste really good. Sorry, guys. It's not, but you know why you're buying it. It's to lose weight or have a healthy snack. But then most people desire the perfect balance. And that's why in that work that we talk about in our masterclass around Wicked Crisps is that we wanted the tension. We wanted to take advantage of that tension and say, we understand the perfect balance between health and taste is important to you. You shouldn't have to compromise. There's that tension that you're feeling. It's okay. Lean in on that tension. We're going to give you both. Licensing effect. So we actually use the words on the back of our packaging, the perfect balance. The perfect balance. And that psychologically triggers you to say, that's an easy decision for me because I'm looking for a perfect balance. Why? It's because you succumb to licensing effect.
It makes so much sense now that you put it that way. The tension, we desire a little bit of tension. That's just a natural human thing. Status quo bias.
All right, here's another one of these guys. Academics come up with a really hard word for a trigger or a mental shortcut, to make decisions faster. And they call something called status quo bias. Really big, guys, I want to just say something like, it is people prefer things to stay the same. We're creatures of habit. I like, actually, Michael, that's a perfect example of leading edge and proven. There's that tension because nobody wants the proven technology always because they want something to be leading edge. If you just give me leading edge, is it proven? So that perfect balance of leading edge, but it meets all the criteria that you need is a great example of using licensing effect. So status quo bias, that is the tendency to prefer things to stay the same. And And this is actually important. And since Michael, you just brought up innovation, status quo bias is a really funny, there's a lot of innovation work in status quo bias. So when I do my research, guys, when I identify that status quo bias is a trigger that people use in a category, I always apologize to my clients. I'm like, hey, good luck with that. Because people don't want to change. Have you seen these books, Who Moved My Cheese? I remember spending 3 days in corporate America training around how to get people to be okay with change, like the Who Moved My Cheese series. The guy made $1 billion on this fear of change. So if you know that you have status quo bias, where there's people who are habitually, they don't want to, or it's a habit, they don't like change, they don't think they need change, you can actually do some things around break free from the routine. I've used that phrase before to say it's okay to break free from the routine. Let me tell you about status quo bias and why it's important if you're in innovation. So Michael, I'm kind of maybe talking to you on this. Status quo bias, what the data would tell you is, I know we're always trying to find breakthrough innovation here. We're as a company or as a new entrepreneur, we want something that's breakthrough. Do you know how difficult it is to take something that nobody has ever seen before and make that a success? Like, we always go back to Apple. This is a classic thing. We always go to the iPod. And before the iPod, then we listened to music on tapes and we couldn't bring it with us. So people always talk about it as innovation. Give me another 5 of those in the last 40 years. There's very few. Here's the reality of innovation. Very rarely does an innovation take off that is truly breakthrough. The data tells you that for almost all innovations that they're successful, 80% of that innovation is the exact same thing that you get in the marketplace today. They just add 20% of new features. It's not because the innovation couldn't take them to a 100% brand new idea. It's because humans don't like change. We can drive autonomous cars right now. The technology is available. Humans don't like to not be in control of their cars. So what do? You ease them into it by saying, we're gonna help you park your car. Next, we're gonna have your car drive just a little bit so you can pick you up from where you want it to be. In 10 years, we're gonna have these small incremental changes because of status quo bias forces us to not move as fast as we wanna move. Those incremental changes will be something we'll look back and go, oh my gosh, self-driving cars. The technology is there today. People will not adopt that technology because of status quo bias.
I like that because I have this cool thing here. It's, if you can see it, it's the hero's journey.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what we do is we meet the hero in their status quo.
Yeah.
And what they realize is change is happening and it's like really scary. Okay. But the problem is status quo isn't not going to stay status quo, and you have to lean in to be, and so there's that tension that you were talking about.
And the only way you can try to scare people into it, and you may get lucky when you say it's coming. If you don't change, you're going to be penalized. That's there. But I also think just saying things like break free from the routine, that just means like, let me get a little bit outside of my comfort zone. People are much more likely to get outside of their comfort zone if you just kind of let them go the incremental 20%. Why? It's because they are influenced by status quo bias. Yep.
So we have the endowment effect.
Endowment effect. People are like, oh God, what is endowment effect? Guys, this is nothing more than people prefer things that they already own, right? So, technically the definition of endowment effect is the tendency to ascribe more value to things merely because they are owned. I like to call the endowment effect my favorite chair that my wife made me throw away when we got married. This is what I remember. I don't know if you've done this before. If not, it's going to happen to you. Me and my wife got married a little bit later in life. I kind of had my own furniture from college that I'd had for a long time. She had her own furniture. It was a little upgraded from mine. And so when we merged our things together in our first house, all of a sudden I saw that my furniture was on Craigslist. I'm like, why is mine? And she didn't even ask me. It was just on there. In fact, I found out because the person came into our house and looking for, because we put my furniture upstairs in a room, and he'd say, well, all of it is for like $600, whatever. And I go, well, no, not the chair. And she looked at me and she's like, well, yes, it is. And I remember to myself, the other furniture I didn't care about, but I had my chair. And you guys know this, like if it's yours, your thing, that guy could not have purchased my chair for $600, and he was about to get everything, a couch, a love seat, and a chair for $600. That chair is pretty nasty, guys, but I loved it because I prefer things that I already own. And you assign economic value and emotional value to things that you already own. So endowment effect influences people's decisions to buy your products. How? You may say things like, and I've looked at some of this stuff like, your membership has its privileges. If you assign a membership to somebody, if you say something like, your pass will expire soon. Now you could say, take advantage of this opportunity while supplies last. If endowment effect is important for your customer, that doesn't mean anything unless you say your pass, your opportunity, your license will expire fast. Because if it's mine, I place higher value on something that I currently own, even if technically I don't own anything. But if you say that, if I assign greater value on that, therefore I'm more likely, like, I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take advantage of your offer. So endowment effect, if you know that your customers have some level of endowment effect on something that they crave things, or they assign value to things that they currently own, tell them that they own a subscription. Tell them that they have this, they have access to the opportunity that you're going to deliver now, and they're likely to lose it. And that's a great way of using endowment effect to kind of make a decision faster and easier.
It's so funny. I was giggling because I'm selling a bunch of junk, and I think that it should go for more. And people are like, they don't value it. Well, you don't understand the history of this thing, right?
It's funny that you called it junk. I don't know. When you call it junk, or deep down inside, it's junk, because if you had endowment effect, Steve, you wouldn't call yourself junk. That stuff is like priceless treasure, right?
I could just see you going, wait a minute, but those are my Cheetos. I put those Cheetos in that chair.
Absolutely. Those are my crumbs. Every one of them count.
Reciprocity. This is my favorite. This is one of the influence principles.
Yeah. It's a classic one that Cialdini has talked about for many, many years. But reciprocity, it sounds kind of clinical. And what does that mean? Really, what that means in layman's terms is people prefer the payback. They prefer payback. So psychologically, reciprocity is the tendency to desire to repay in kind for what another has provided us. So free trials is one of the most important things that companies use for reciprocity. That and sampling. So let me do sampling first. Every time you go to a Costco, or if you go to a grocery store and they have a sampling event, there are really two purposes behind that sampling event. First is the one that you're probably thinking about, which is, well, they get to try my product, they get to taste my chip, they get to drink my wine or whatever. And so if they sample it, then they're more likely to buy it. Yes, that's very true. They get to taste your product, they're more likely to buy it because they've at least, they know they like it. There's also a psychological principle, a trigger in there called reciprocity, which is that if I give you a little glass of wine, there is a psychological tension there that you want to repay me in kind in something. Sometimes it's a compliment. Oh my gosh, I love your wine. It's so unique. Or sometimes it's actually go and buy the bottle. So reciprocity is our feeling, or this tension of we have to pay back somebody. This is why if you're in a poker match, especially with neighbors or friends, that you don't walk away from the table after you just won a big pot, right? Why? It's because everybody at the table understands that there's this feeling of reciprocity. Yes, I won big here, and now your opportunity is going to win for me. Same thing when you go to a bar. When somebody buys a round of drinks, there is a tension for people also who had a round of drinks bought for them to buy. Why? Economically, it makes no sense. You just got free beer. But reciprocity is this tension inside you. Says, hey, listen, this person just bought a round, so should I. So people prefer the payback. So if you know that, well, then sampling events are going to work really well for your company. Another thing would be these free trials. Like, hey, you get 1 month's free trial of my new program, and there's no risk obligation for you. You can return it back if you want. Why? It's just like a sampling event, but there's a sense of reciprocity. If I give you access to a free program, you're much more likely to reciprocate in kind with something. The last one example I'll give you is in marketing research. If you guys noticed years and years ago, they don't do this anymore, but oftentimes non-for-profits would send you an envelope with $1 in it, or maybe even a penny with a survey. A penny. It would be taped in there. And what they found is if you put a penny inside of the envelope, response rates to surveys goes up dramatically. for a penny. Now that makes no logical sense, right? Why in the world would a penny make me get out and take a 30-minute survey on pen and paper, put that back into an envelope and mail it out? Why? It's because marketing researchers understand human behavior and realize that even just by putting in a penny, that sense of reciprocity, this person gave me a penny, therefore I'm much more likely to go ahead and do the survey. It was a trick that was used a long time ago, but that's the idea of reciprocity. It makes a decision much faster and easier. They gave me a penny, I better fill out this form.
You know, I used to use that reciprocity principle to get actual appointment with someone.
Yeah.
So if I'd been trying to meet them, I would either bring some sort of little gift or send them a little gift, and it would work. They would go, well, at least I'm going to give him a little bit of time. Good. And that was like super effective. It was a great way to go around a barrier.
Yeah, and also, Steve, what I like about what we're talking about is these are not manipulative. These are not like, I'm not forcing that person to call me up, but I just know it makes his decision faster and easier. He wants to call me. He is not going to call me for a penny, or he's not going to call you because you gave him a white paper, whatever it is, right? That is not enough. But if he wants to do it anyways, that is just a slight little nudge to get that person to go, yes, faster and easier decision. I owe it to this person. So all of these, I hope you guys are seeing, these are not those, the Winter Soldier manipulation. I'm mind controlling you. You have to have a motivation in the first place. And that's a big part of marketing and marketing mind states. We're only talking about one element of marketing and mind states. If you start with only triggers, I'm going to tell you there's a reason why that triggers is chapter 7. Because if you just jump to chapter 27 or chapter 7 and just do triggers, your marketing's not going to work. It's not going to work. So there's a function, there's a reason why these things build.
All right. Inequality aversion. I'm interested in this.
Inequality aversion. This is probably the one that most people would get, but it's still an academic term, which is the tendency to desire fairness and resistance to incidental inequalities among populations. Really what that means is that for some people in some decisions, they prefer fairness. They don't want to be, hey, you're our loyal customer, therefore we're going to give you added incentives or anything else. What they want to know is that everybody's kind of treated the same. Again, there's this tension between what makes me special versus other people. So rather than kind of trying to force this tension, it's like, listen, just treat us all the same. So this is used sometimes, and if you are lucky enough to do this, this is a great way of using it, is pay what you want pricing. And these are these things that says, listen, some people can afford to pay more for this. Some people can't afford to pay very much. Pay whatever you can afford. That signals to the person reading about your offer that you're being fair to everybody's economic kind of considerations at that moment. So pay what you want pricing is a great example of using inequality aversion. The next one is I came up with was, have you guys seen the new AT&T commercials where you have the customer in the AT&T store and they're a new customer and they get this new program, this new offer, whatever it is. And all of a sudden a customer breaks through the door. They're around like, wait, I want access to that. And they're like, yes, of course. If you're a customer or a non-customer, we treat everybody the same. Everybody gets access to our new program. Why that matters is, you know how much frustration there was when you would sit there and you're like, wait a minute, why do new customers get a rebate for $50, but yet I've been your loyal customer for 2 or 3 years and I'm not getting a check for $50? So what does that do? A lot of people cancel their subscriptions or their plans, and then they reorder. I know you guys have done it on cable. I know I've done it. We've done it on cable and satellite TV. We've done it on Pandora, because companies, they actually put me into a position where I feel like I have to cancel my service just so that I'm fair and I'm equal with somebody who's never used the product before. Why make your customers do that if you know that they're driven by inequality aversion? So what you do is, like, everybody gets the same plan. There are no differences.
Yeah, I feel that's unfair. I call my cable company, and every once in a while I got to okay, I'm considering leaving. And they always make an adjustment. And I'm going, why don't you guys be proactive? Right. It'd be a different relationship. Why do I have to threaten to break up all the time?
I know. And this is one of the most frustrating things. And we've all felt that too. And that's why I love what you and I talk about, just being human. And if you know you're giving the better deal to somebody who barely knows you versus your loyal customer, you got to question that as a company. You have to question that as a company. And so what do? You force your loyal customers to make all the effort to pretend like they're going to change the whole thing. Like I don't really have an opportunity to change my cell plan. Like out here, I only get one carrier, AT&T. But you're right, Steve. Every 3 years, I call AT&T and tell them I'm going to switch to Verizon, even though Verizon won't work here, just so I can get the deal that other people are. That doesn't make any sense, guys. But we've all done it. So inequality aversion is another simple trigger. And again, let me just reiterate, is that these triggers, I'm not telling you to use these 5 triggers. And in fact, you may find that neither of these 5. That's okay. I got 21 more in the book, Marketing to Mind States. You can look at more of these triggers in other books as well. My point is understanding how important it is to find the triggers that make sense for your business. And when you do that, you can integrate these into your marketing, into your programs. You can get somebody who wants to buy from you to actually buying from you. And that's a big difference when it comes to cash flow.
All right, perfect. So Mindstate Marketing, this is why you need to read this book, because it's going to help you to apply the triggers that are relevant to what your audience prefers to make decisions better.
That's what we do here. We have programs at mindstategroup.com that'll train you on how to use these triggers in the most effective way. And the book is going to be a great first step to getting kind of down that runway, down the path of making much better, more compelling marketing.
All right, so it's that time of the show where, again, if you're hanging out, this is why you're going to be the smartest person in marketing in your peer group, because why? You hang out with Will Leach. Now, Will, here's a question. You ready?
I'm ready.
What marketing strategies are most effective right now?
Wow. I'm going to go out on a limb and say every one of the marketing strategies can be effective right now. So there's this idea that what worked 2 years ago will no longer work now. So if you're doing, a Facebook ad to a webinar, to a phone call, some people say, oh, that's dated. That's a couple of years ago. Really, you have to do is LinkedIn ads to a live workshop and then upsell them on coaching. All of these things, all of these hacks, all of these growth opportunities, they can all work if, and that's the big if you are understanding and messaging to people's mind state. So what marketing strategies are most effective right now? Any marketing strategy that taps into people's goals, their motivations, and then and then the way they approach their decisions. So one that I'm working with right now, one idea that I have right now is a marketing strategy that helps people move from an expert in their field to becoming iconic in their field, right? But I also know that for me to make that transition for somebody, then I need to make sure I understand what is the expert's field, or what is the expert's goals in that field, what are they motivated by, and how do they approach their business. So any marketing strategy can work if it's actually tapping into their customer subconscious.
You think about where that question comes from. What I love about what your book's about, there are aspects of marketing that are timeless, that are universal, that'll always work. And that's because our brains desire information in a certain format. We like to make decisions in a certain way. And that's what connects. So there's a timeless aspect. What will always work is the timeless things. Where maybe like COVID or the pandemic may have put people more in a cautious achievement mind state. Those can impact it, but you can always default back to the timeless principles.
Yeah, I talk about the timeless expression of a timeless principle. Mm-hmm. So the way it comes to life is in a timely way, in a COVID way, in whatever the national news is saying, that's timely. You have to start with the timeless principles. And I think that's what behavioral psychology, mindset marketing does.
Love it. So how do you find a reliable business advice? There's all sorts of experts and coaches out there now.
I know. And that's a hard question. I will say this. I think that any reliable business advice has to come from somebody who has gone through that issue. So for instance, I do my marketing through ROI, and I needed to build out a marketing system that would drive inbound marketing. Who do I go to? Who do I go to do that? There's lots of companies that say they can do something about inbound marketing. I go to the company that has done that work. ROI, that's you, right? You wrote an entire book about doing that. So when you want to find expert advice, go to somebody who has done what you're trying to do. Same thing with scaling. If you're going to scale your business, You want to go to somebody who has scaled multiple businesses. Not that they know the theory of scaling business. I want somebody who's scaled their own business, not that they've helped scale others. I want to know how you scaled your business. Same thing with mindset coaching, right? When people talk about helping coaches or something, helping entrepreneurs get into the right mindset, which is very important, I think, to growth. I want to know that you're not just a psychologist. I want to know that you had fears of your own, that you had inadequacies of your own, of trying to prepare for something. So always go to experts who have gone through the exact same thing that you're trying to do. And if you do that, then that's going to be generally more reliable business advice.
Excellent. I like that. When do you know you need to hire some outside help, Will?
I heard about the 2 a.m. rule. The 2 a.m. rule is this. I read this one time, and it said basically you will finally, hire outside help when at 2 a.m. you're still up trying to do something on your business. Now, for me, it wasn't 2 a.m. It was probably a little bit earlier than that because I'm an old man. But here's what I would say. When I was at PepsiCo, I remember that whenever we needed to introduce a new product into the marketplace, oftentimes we just go buy the company that was already offering that and then just outsource it. We just outsource the manufacturing, the brand, everything else. We just go buy something. I think that you should be thinking about outsourcing anything where you don't have, the capability, whether it's time or the expertise. I think you should start hiring outside help on revenue. You guys know cash flow is the number one thing that you need for your business. And if you don't have time for sales or, kind of bringing in inbound sales, or you're not really good at it, my guess or my advice to you is go find outside help because you need revenues and cash flow to maintain your operations, all that stuff. So I think it's time to outsource when you need cash flow and hire experts to do that. If it's operationally driven, generally, I think that you wait until 2 a.m. If you're still working on your operations past 2 a.m., it's probably time for you to bring in an ops guy. If you are, struggling with sales, you don't want to wait until at 2 a.m. You're just kind of overwhelmed. You still haven't brought in sales. Go outsource that help.
Excellent answer. I agree. All right. So now you have this little thing called the Mindstate Marketing class. Tell us a little bit about this, Will.
That's right. We have a master class for somebody who has read the principles of marketing to mind states. They've been watching this show for a while, but they want to take it to the next level. So the Mindstate Masterclass is a 12-hour tutorial, video-based. You can go to it on your own time. And what you do is you dive deeper into the concepts that are presented in Marketing Mind States through video-based coursework, through downloads. But what you get a chance to do, and I think is most useful for people, is that they get to actually see these principles applied to a business called Wicked Crisps. And so each week, you actually, or each video module, you learn a new concept, and then you see how I applied that concept to my personal life, as well as that concept to Wicked Crisp. So it's a great way of really understanding Mindstate marketing and applying it to your business, but on your terms, on your own time.
All right. So in every good show, there's always a call to action. This right here. First, get the book. If you don't have the book, I'm telling you, it's one of the best books that'll help you be the smartest person in marketing with the people you hang out with. Second, you need to go to Will's website and learn more here at the Mindstate Group. He's got a great classes. He's got a great book. He'll work with you. There's a lot of options there. Will, what's one little word of advice, wisdom for us to get us through this weekend?
Yep. Hey, you and I talk about this all the time. Empathy, empathy, empathy. I think everything we talk about in these clinical terms ultimately comes down to, do you love your customer? Can you provide them something that they really need? And do you empathize with them? And if you understand the kind of some of these things that we've talked about today and on lots of these other shows, you're going to be in a better place, not just as a business owner, but as a person. So build empathy for your other, common man out there, and the world's going to be a better place.
Great show, Will. So how to use science to connect with your clients. And it's the Mindstate Marketing Hour. Now I'm going over here. I'm going to kick this little trigger here. You guys stay tuned. We'll be back next week. We appreciate your comments, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
We'll talk soon. Over. And I'm hitting the wrong one here. I can do this.